Not a lot of introduction necessary here. I'm going to watch and talk about every episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 1 and sort them into a ranking. If you just want to watch the best, most important episodes, skim the highlights, or cram the whole thing into your head at once, this is the place to start. This is just for the 2000s computer animated series, though eventually I'd like to branch out from there. Conventional murmurings across the internet will tell you that the Clone Wars seasons started off pretty weak, or that this character or that were pretty bad, or the animation, whatever. Then the whole thing gets better at a certain point. We'll have to see about that. Dave Filoni is a lot more of a household Star Wars name now than he was back then, so it'll be fun to see some of his earlier influences taking shape here. So, do you need to watch every episode of this show? Answer, no, of course not. So I'll watch it for you and highlight both the best and most skippable, in my opinion. Anyway, let's jump into it. So, every episode starts with a recap of events leading up to the current situation in the style of a mid-century radio announcer. And that fast-talking, information-dense style helps keep the audience from getting lost while just throwing characters at you. Even in this first episode, there's an assumption that you know who most of these people are, or at least that you saw the movies. Yoda shows up on this random planet of Toydarians with some clone troopers. We get right into this hot political intrigue action where Asajj Ventress and Count Dooku challenge Yoda to an ambush battle thing. It's all set dressing for clone-on battle droid action and lets Yoda show off his burgeoning dementia. If I remember right, these paper-thin excuse for a fight plots happen fairly frequently, especially earlier on, and they carry little substance. It's not a good start for this show. The action is barren and bloodless, the stakes are low, and we're mostly just being introduced to the time period being post-Attack of the Clones and before Revenge of the Sith, which, you know, it's the era where the Clone Wars happened. If this episode had a point, it would be to introduce all the fun slurs the clone troopers use for droids.
Clankers. Clankers sent reinforcements. Give it to the clankers. That's just slow those fuckers down.
Stop! I said stop!
Also, they have to assume the audience didn't watch the Clone Wars cartoon miniseries that introduced Asajj, so she's here too. That said, this is very off course for what I think an introductory episode of the show like this should be. I don't know, this episode is immediately a hard pass. But the last couple of minutes where Yoda shows up and straight up one-ups Ventress as she's about to hard murder King Bugman, that's pretty awesome. Yoda feels 10 feet tall here, and it's not worth the entire episode for this one awesome moment, but this moment is pretty great. Anyway, good guys win is hardly surprising, so let's move on. It's the first episode, but if the list had a bottom, this would be it. I hope episode 2 is better. The recap again covers stuff that we have never seen in the show before, and even contains Ahsoka, who, if I'm not mistaken, has never been introduced in any Star Wars media before now. Hold on, let me Google that. Oh, Christ. Okay, so the movie counts as the pilot for the show. See, I'm a Star Wars fan, and even I misremembered where the show actually starts compared to this horrible movie. But whatever. I watched that movie one time, and it was terrible. I'm gonna forget that it exists now. I'll circle back to it later, I guess. Anyway, on with the show. I shall withhold from criticism about the sudden character introductions for now, but in exchange, I'm gonna tear that movie a new one when I get to it. None of that matters, because Plo Koon is awesome. Plo's facing off against Count Dooku and asks Anakin for assistance, but Anakin is all, oh, we have to talk to the council before we do anything. Anyway, while they chit-chat, Dooku and Grievous move in for the attack on Plo, getting the first attack off. I'm actually kind of already into it. Dooku does some mustache twirling and sends hunters after the life pods that escaped from the ship. The animation's really stiff right now, like, oof. Plo looks great, but he doesn't have to talk. Everyone else looks kind of rough. Luckily, what this show lacks in animation, it makes up for in style. Hard to knock it, given the age, and it gets the point across just fine. It's not too distracting. Anyway, clone troopers take off their helmets in the life pods and hang out with Plo for a bit, and then they notice someone's going around popping the other life pods. Uh-oh. Plo relying on his wits and limited resources to rescue stranded troopers and the other life pods is actually pretty compelling, though. I can't help but notice that the life pods look like TIE fighter cockpits from the future. The battle droids find another life pod and pop it open again, and holy crap, violent decompression. Those guys are dead. And the battle droids are just like, yep, good job, move on. That was violent and insane. Wow. This freaking Planka is humming the Imperial March on his way to murder another clone. Amazing. Just amazing. Look how happy he is. Then Plo leaves the shuttle with his clone troopers like it's no big deal.
Where are you going, sir?
Outside.
leaves the spaceship and just starts doing magic space stuff. It's really obnoxious. It's shockingly unsatisfying for the stakes that were set up like 2 minutes ago. I mean, they had this really awesome whole thing where Plo is, going from life pod to life pod, trying to survive, trying to rescue others. It was very cool. And then he just gets out. He just gets out into the vacuum of space. I hate it.
Sergeant, why are you so certain no one is coming?
We're just clones, sir. We're meant to be expendable.
Not to me.
That line was supposed to hit a lot harder, but LOL, all the other clones that didn't have a Jedi with them are super dead. We even saw some explosively decompress. I love that scene. No one would have come looking. The clones are absolutely right. If it hadn't been for a Jedi there on the council in the middle of all this, nobody would have cared. It's not like, oh, maybe some clones survived. We're gonna go drive back and look. No. We move on to a scene where all the power has to go out on the ship to hide from the Capital Crusher ship. They make a point of shutting down R2-D2, but forget to unplug the medical droid, blowing their location when the medical droid comes all out like, burp, burp, I'm a medical droid. What can I do? For no reason. There has no plot significance for him to actually walk up to the front. He can just be on in the back, and then we could be like, oh, we forgot to unplug the medical droid, but no, he has to walk all the way up to the front just for the dramatic timing. I put this episode squarely above the first one. It's a lot better, and the Plo Koon stuff was really engaging right up until they did a bunch of action stuff in an empty vacuum of space. That was less cool. Still, above the first. Liked this episode overall.
There they go.
So unlike the last two episodes, this one picks up from the previous as a kind of part 2, so the recap actually works. Anakin concocts a plan to murder General Grievous, and even Plo Koon is like, this is an aggressive plan, but maybe we can make it even more hardcore.
Boy, this is a lot more fun when they're not shooting back. I still can't seem to hit anything.
They say as they literally shoot a defenseless carrier they just ionized. Dooku berates Grievous for backhanding one of the droids. Dooku equals pro-droid confirmed. Young Ahsoka gives me the creeps in these early episodes. She grows up so much over the course of the show and even in other shows. Seeing her this young is one thing, but the tube top really feels out of character compared to her later designs. I don't know, it's just ugh. I know at this point in history, people generally hated it, even though she's now considered an all-around badass. I have nothing to add on to that. I wonder how bad she really is in these early seasons.
What's taking so long? I want to get there before too many wounded clones escape.
Sorry, sir.
Holy crap, Grievous, murder hobo much? He goes right off the evil edge in this one. He was already evil before, but like now this is just hilariously evil. Whoa. This close-up on the Camino lady's face looks downright scary. Nothing else is really happening in this episode, so I can talk about all these other little details. If I were a 6-year-old watching this is the part of the episode I'm off playing with my action figures. Anyway, on the way to the battle, Anakin's shortcut results in an attack by local space manta rays. It's a very Star Trek thing. A ton of Star Trek episodes have something to do with a giant space creature simply vibing out in space until people come mess with it. Unlike Star Trek, the space manta thing is resolved as fast as the ships can fly around all the critters, so pretty instantly. Starting with the previous episode, the clone body count is already climbing. Clone deaths directly caused by Jedi arrogance is probably going to be a running theme moving on, so attempts to humanize the clones this early comes off kind of morbid. Anyway, good guys shoot big laser explode, ship go boom, Grievous get away, because of course he does. Everybody pats everybody on the back, episode ends. That's it. That's the episode. No one learned anything and nothing progressed in any meaningful way at all. This is a full-on skippable episode. Below the previous episode, but still much better than the first.
Grievous, those battle droids are expensive.
Now, onto what I hope is the finale of the Malevolence mini-arc. Okay, so General Grievous's ship didn't actually do a full-on explode in the last episode, just a mini-explode. Now, he's running away and the good guys are giving chase. Dooku and Sheev organize the capture of Padme so they have a viable hostage to get the Republic off of Grievous's tail. Oh, Sheev, working from the shadows.
Are you sure the information from Chancellor Palpatine is reliable?
It's kind of neat to watch his machinations play out, as he's the only one who ever seems to know what's going on. He doesn't even appear on screen this time and his claws are still all over this trap. Girl boss Padme has some other plans though. After she gets put en route of Grievous's ship and her ship gets captured, she decides to break herself out and leave the engines to self-destruct. Grievous says to sound the alarm because they have stowaways on board, but are they really stowaways if you literally force them onto your ship?
Do we have a plan B? Every operation needs a backup, Anakin.
Anakin and Obi-Wan sneak onto the Malevolence to rescue Padme while Padme rescues herself. They meet in the middle, where Padme survives a firing squad of battle droids with zero cover whatsoever. C-3PO, who, by the way, is also there, gets murdered by a train, and now he needs to be rescued as well. Anakin and Padme's stuff is establishing that while they have separate lives, they're in a relationship nonetheless. It's a good characterization, but it's nothing we didn't already know from the movies. Then General Grievous ambushes Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Hello there.
He says the thing, he does the meme. Memes are fun. Anyway, one implausible droid fight later, Kenobi goes off to destroy the Malevolence hyperdrive, while C-3PO does some recreational surrendering. Luckily, it's just R2-D2. No idea how he survived the train wreck, though. Anakin and Padme take the bridge and exchange some horrific one-liners before sabotaging the hyperdrive themselves, as Obi-Wan's now being chased around. So that leaves us to wrap up the Grievous-Kenobi fight, which admittedly is pretty neat at this point, but every fight these two ever have is pretty neat, so, you know, give or take. The good guys reunite, and bing bang boom, they escape. I mean, it feels like, as I described this, that it's all happening really fast, but it all really just happens about this fast. There's some chit-chat in between, but the pacing itself is move, 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 move. Grievous chases down the heroes in his own fighter, and predictably, the Malevolence does the big explode when it tries to go into hyperspace. I literally wrote this before it happened, but wait, oh my god. I was bamboozled because the Malevolence literally hyperjumps into the side of a nearby moon. Grievous gets a call from Dooku just as he realizes what's about to happen, and he just hangs up on him without a word. What a mood. It's the best part of the whole episode, just click. Episode end, Malevolence destroyed. While overall it was a weak arc, we did get introduced to how the principal cast largely interacts with each other in this mission-scale war story. I mean, if you expect anything other than the good guys win and the bad guys lose but survive, you're watching the wrong show. That may change moving forward, but some characters' fates are set in stone, others less so. The writers know this. This episode was still under the second episode, but better than the previous. The whole arc can be skipped without much fuss.
You have to trust me!
I like this episode. It is the first major episode that doesn't follow the main characters from the movie. Instead, we're focusing on a bunch of rookie clones who have been deployed before they could finish their training because of the demands of the war, blah blah blah. So we get Fives, Echo, and Heavy, who are characters we will come to know and love in the future, and they've been stuck on this quiet posting, and droids attack. There's the cooler, newer battle droids. That's pretty fun. An inspection team is coming and they figure out something is wrong. The inspection team includes Commander Cody and Captain Rex, two more main characters we're going to have going on. This episode is the best one yet. So far, all of the episodes have introduced existing Star Wars characters, and this time we get 5 major clone characters, and the episode wastes no time characterizing them as individuals. The rookies, Fives, Echo, and Heavy each have their own quirks and approaches to different situations, but the focus here is on the by-the-books Commander Cody and the quick-witted and heroic Captain Rex. Definitely a gung-ho action commando type, while Commander Cody plays more into the raw leadership role, at least early on. We'll see how that changes. Fives, Echo, and Heavy have less to do in this episode, but since I know they get fleshed out more later on, this is a great start for what will end up being our principal cast for the show, at least for the non-Jedi side of the story. This stuff is what makes Clone Wars great. Watching the clones work together and coordinate their missions without super force powers or strict plot armor makes these episodes even more compelling. Heavy sacrifices himself to save the day, which goes into what I was talking about with their paper-thin plot armor. It's fantastic. Any of these guys could drop in any given episode as far as the audience knows. I put this episode on top of the list so far and put it as the first must-watch episode on the list. Its introduction to the clones as lead characters and the formation of the 501st is significant enough, and it's just a good, solid episode with great pacing and very little messing around at all. I don't know what could top it this early on, but this is a great place to start the series and really should have been the first episode.
Do we take prisoners?
I don't.
This episode features General Grievous' fleet attacking pursuing Rebel Republic ships from an advantageous position inside an asteroid belt, and doing a ton of damage. I was not engaged until Anakin sprung his trap and the music picked up, revealing Captain Rex and the 501st having hidden a bunch of walkers on the asteroids themselves in the belt in advance, letting Grievous ships pass by, and then they open fire in the rear. It's a pretty hype moment. It's just dumb enough to be awesome. The little trick is the Uno reverse card on this one-sided battle. Grievous even jumps ship and takes off, which for only episode 6, done this a lot already in this show.
Well, I guess I'm in charge now.
Anakin takes a hit out of nowhere, and we cut to him in a back-to-tank or whatever, and it's so jarring it could almost be played for comedy. But what's this? R2-D2 is dead. I mean, she really says it like R2-D2 is dead, not like he's missing, and then they treat it like he's just missing. Obi-Wan shows his hand as a droid racist, being like, don't show an attachment to the R2 unit. It's pretty funny. I love droids. This episode tries objectifying droids even harder with the new R3 unit being in gold, but Anakin knows what's up. Can't replace the old R2. So they decide they're gonna go track down R2-D2. They track down a Transocean scavenger that might have R2. I'm already thinking that Anakin's just gonna heartlessly sell this droid off just to get R2-D2 back, which, given how this episode plays out, is probably not a bad idea. I do dig the creepy droid collector aesthetic. They show off a bunch of IG droids, which is our personal favorite. Obviously, the IG droids turn on and start the action scene. IG droids are awesome. Droids are awesome in general. IG droids are lore complicated though, and this episode uses them super casually, which I guess is fine, but whatever. I'm not gonna get into that nerd rabbit hole. Anakin just keeps verbally abusing this poor R3 unit through the episode like holy crap, and he leans really heavily into being aggressive and intimidating in a way that feels a little premature, but they probably didn't think they were gonna get 7 full seasons at this point and didn't want to take too long selling his emotional transformation to the dark side. I bring this up now because if I recall, they pull back on this pretty heavily moving forward, and he plays a bit more straight and narrow in the future, at least for a few seasons. Anakin's turn is like the most important thing this show can address to fix what the movies sort of skimmed past, so the more time they take with it, the better. Anyway, R2-D2 rescues himself, once again showing that Anakin can't rescue anyone faster than they can rescue themselves, and from here on we get R2-D2 hijinks on the scavenger ship. They make a point to illustrate that R3 isn't just slightly worse than R2-D2, but is an absolute liability and probably straight up a traitor. R3 activates a tracker that summons Grievous and his merry men, all while R3 actively attempts to get Anakin killed in the ensuing dogfight. Anakin's largely been an annoying character so far, so watching this dumb little droid stick it to him is pretty great, to be honest. This episode is great if you like droid stuff like I do, but otherwise it's a pass. I put it under rookies, but above the Malevolence arc. I'm not sure where this goes, but I guess we'll find out.
Launch everything we have!
Sir, it's only one fighter. He can't escape.
Everything!
This one picks up where the last one left off. Grievous is trying to get R2-D2 from a traitor to plunder his droid brain for Republic secrets. Anakin stages a rescue mission for R2 against Obi-Wan's explicit instructions, cementing his repressed feelings on droids. The gang reaches the hideout where the bad guys are keeping R2 and do a paradrop, which is cool until we see Ahsoka literally just holding her breath on the way down. Like, I can't even begin to describe everything insane about that. Like, I get it, it's super silly, and they could have just not pointed it out and no one would have thought anything about it. Like, why? Okay, never mind. R3 is straight up revealed to be a traitor, which is unsurprising completely. Seeing R2 torn up to pieces on a droid operating table is beyond sad though. Gruesome, really. I mean, I grew up with this character since I was itty bitty, and this is rough. C-3PO being torn apart is one thing, but R2, my boy, my little heart. Fun note, this is the first time Ahsoka and Grievous meet face to face, and they exchange some quick one-liners before getting into the obligatory fight scene of the episode. I don't know why Ahsoka keeps falling for the R3's tricks, but the heel turn happened a while ago. R2-D2 literally reconstructs himself like a creepy living parasite thing that is possibly even more unsettling than the deconstruction in the first place. Like, whoa, I didn't know he could do that. Of all the plot armor in Star Wars, R2-D2 has the strongest. Ahsoka vs. Grievous is kinda okay. She gets walloped pretty completely, although she does manage to remove one of his hands when she does escape, so that's pretty rad. The battle in the hangar between the good guys and the droids is standard fare, entertaining but not the most compelling. Grievous runs away again, surprise. At the end, this is the whole point of coming to this episode. R2 and R3 square up and get their own short and actually pretty interesting battle as R2 savagely immolates R3, then heartlessly cuts the wire to drop R3 to his doom. It's as hardcore as two trash cans battling for trash can dominance can be, so there's that. I rank this episode above the Malevolence arc, but below the rest. It has good moments, but it's mostly passable.
Go up to level 8. Get your head adjusted. It feels great. That'll feel great. What the?
it's the Jar Jar episode. The moment he opens his mouth, I immediately want him to stop speaking. I don't even hate Jar Jar that much, but God, this episode really nails how annoying Jar Jar is. Even Sheev is like, are you serious, kid? You want to bring this guy? Anyway, Padme's trying to negotiate some peace treaty on Rhodia without backup, and smartly and correctly leaves Jar Jar on the ship. Also, I get that this is a TV show for casual audiences, so like subtitles for alien voices isn't really viable, but the Rhodians are speaking common/English in this episode instead of Rhodese. It's weird. I mean, that's showing my nerd card and totally unrelated to the quality of the episode, but hey, I like Rhodians. I like to think that their difficulty with speaking the human language is part of their charm. I mean, look at Jar Jar. His barely understandable and even speaks Gungan in this very same episode. Sorry that I'm getting off track here, but the start of this episode is genuinely kind of hard to watch. Putting Jar Jar and C-3PO together to see which one of them is less competent and can drunken master their way up to victory should be more compelling, and it does get better throughout the episode. The Padme Uncle Anno stuff is a pretty big hard pass for me. I just don't care. Anno betrays Padme for Nute Gunray, blah 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 blah. Look at this cut where Anno is just like staring blankly at Padme's cell. I don't know how much time has passed, but I like to imagine he just kind of shut down for a while there. Anyway, back to my earlier point, there's this other Rhodian assistant that comes in to talk to Anno, and he's speaking fluent Rhodese, no subtitles, and it's missing the shrill synthetic sound that Rhodians usually have, but boom, there he is, he's speaking Rhodese. I don't know, it's a weird juxtaposition, maybe I'm making too much of it. Anyway, it's Jar Jar cosplay time. He gets mistaken for a Jedi by Nute Gunray, and oh, we can see where this is going. It's the episode that spawned 1,000 memes. Jedi Jar Jar, Darth Jar Jar, you name it. I'm convinced this is where it all started. Luckily, Padme illustrates once again that she will simply rescue herself immediately upon becoming bored, so no worries there. She comes off like an action hero, to be honest, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
The ship has been destroyed.
Battle droids?
No.
Jar Jar?
Jar Jar.
Eventually, we get a scene where Jar Jar is literally racing away from the Super Battle Droid's missile and gives a fish a little kiss on the cheek, and Anno calls Jar Jar Master Bombad out of nowhere, and I'm just gone, man. What even is happening in this episode? Nute Gunray gets arrested, clones arrive. Next. This has some fun moments, but if you don't like Jar Jar, this is a hard pass. So for most people, it's a hard pass. I put this one below the Malevolence arc.
Shoot him! Shoot them all!
We get our first Master Luminara and Ahsoka episode at last. We're continuing loosely from Bombad Jedi. Nute Gunray is being transported to space jail. I don't know who these Senate commandos are, but they give off kind of a White Knight Holy Order vibe. The space paladins are awesome at a glance. Sheev and Dooku conspire to send Asajj Ventress to silence Nute Gunray before he can spill the evil beans. God, I hope she succeeds. Ahsoka and Luminara do an interrogation of Gunray when Ahsoka goes all psycho cop on him, while Luminara is trying to take the softer Jedi approach. Ahsoka's been spending too much time with Anakin, but I love the psycho vibe. It's super fun to watch her overstep and get results anyway, and it informs the Anakin influence on her without hitting you over the head with it. She could just come off as incompetent, but since we know the future version of Ahsoka is not incompetent at all, right now she looks largely misguided, which is a lot more compelling. I think without that context, maybe she looks naive and strong-headed, but misguided actually really works a lot better. So Asajj infiltrates the ship and decapitates a clone trooper outright, and literally the next scene she spares a helpless droid looking for her, so I shall add Asajj to the pro-droid column. Hell yeah, she spares this little guy, like, it's awesome. It would have been way easier to murder the droid than do her thing. Instead, she slinks around the room planting bombs, and that's big points from me, and the droid survives in the end. Ahsoka threatens to straight up murder Asajj, so again, dark side points. She turns the tables on Ahsoka and escapes down an elevator shaft with double lightsabers guiding her way down, which is super cool, and Luminara shows up. I heard somewhere that people don't really like Luminara, and I don't really see it. She's a Jedi zealot for sure, but she's a professional and sticks to her guns. Maybe it's because she underestimates Ahsoka? Can't blame her there. Not with what we've seen so far. The Luminara vs. Asajj fight is awesome. Luminara takes a steam blast to the eye that affects her combat ability, but she keeps it up anyway. And I love this fight. It's fast, it's back and forth, ups and downs. It's great, and it shows off two fighters at their peak, dueling to the death. Even when Ahsoka turns up to help, Luminara doesn't stop to berate Ahsoka for defying her orders, but instead thanks her and immediately jumps to working as a team to overcome Asajj. It's great. The Senate Commando's heel turn, that was fairly easy to see coming. It would have honestly been more interesting if they were played straight instead of being in on the scheme from the beginning or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I don't think it adds anything to the episode. Just cut all that stuff and focus on the Luminara fight and things are really solid. It would have been fine if Asajj did all of it by herself and she rescued or killed Nute Gunray or whatever, but instead we have to have this whole side thing going on. In the end, Nute Gunray gets away and Asajj saunters off like it's no big deal. Status quo restored, and like I said before, any episode where the good guys lose automatically gains a heap of points in my book. I loved this one. I put it right below Rookies, but it's not mandatory viewing. Almost though, and I might change my mind on that later depending on the Luminara stuff. Still, moving on.
Of course, make sure your contributions are noted in my report to Count Dooku.
Ooh, a Kit Fisto episode. Gotta catch Nute Gunray. Luminara and Ahsoka do a warm handoff to Fisto for the episode, and off we go on an adventure. Does Kit Fisto have a roughly Jamaican accent because his Leku look kind of like dreadlocks? If so, that's racist. Still, he's one cool cat. Is that racist? He's got this Mon Calamari Padawan who is adorably bumbling. So they arrive on this planet to try to suss out Nute Gunray, but it turns out he is not here, and instead this was some elaborate ploy by Darth Tyrannus to get Kit Fisto and his friends to bait out someone else. But who? Well, the gang quickly discovers that they are standing in the home lair of General Grievous. Of course, Grievous comes home and the gang ambushes him. Dirty pool, if you ask me. Grievous gets all cut up and runs off to his medical droid, who gives him so much sass. It's great. You know how I feel about droids by now. From here on, we're doing Saw House of Grievous edition, so that's pretty neat. Didn't expect a dungeon crawl in Clone Wars, especially not one where Grievous gets to be the dungeon master. While that is going on, Grievous submits to his repairs and we almost get some cool under the mask action, but alas, no such lore. It would have been cool to learn new stuff about Grievous, but instead we get a Dark Jedi Nadar and a gloriously evil medical droid, who I truly hope we get more of, but no. He gets gutted just as soon as he is getting good. For shame. Also, Kit Fisto is definitely Team Anti-Droid, and Team Dead Padawan to boot. Rip Nadar, you let your hatred guide you. Luckily for Fisto, he is too cool for school and escapes alone, leaving a trail of dead droids and clone troopers behind him. But not before we get his one-on-one with Grievous. Fisto cuts off Grievous's hand that's holding Nadar's lightsaber and dual wields it with his own for the final battle. It doesn't match the level of intensity as the Luminara and Asajj fight, but it makes up for it with the emotional beat of losing a Padawan who gave in to his hatred and fell instantly. I liked this episode. I put it under Cloak of Darkness, but it's still pretty high up on the list right now. It's a great standalone little romp, not mandatory viewing, but an enjoyable short story all the same.
Don't be upset with me, Master. If you were a better fighter, we would not be having this conversation.
This show makes you feel like you missed something no matter how many episodes you watch in a row. Spacesuit Kenobi is out to rescue Anakin and sneaks into a battle droid prison ship. I could probably count on one hand the number of times I've seen anyone in Star Wars wear a spacesuit ever at all. So he springs Anakin from his cell and returns his lightsaber, and then they head after Darth Tyrannus, who promptly escapes via standard issue bad guy escape hatch number 1. Brings us to our second major incident of the episode. Darth Tyrannus returns to his ship to discover scavengers looting both vessels. Interstage right, Hondo's first appearance. Seeing this smooth talker not get his head ripped off by Darth Tyrannus and instead managing to score some credits off of him and the Solar Sailor while he's at it, pretty fun. Tyrannus is playing it cool, which is pretty amazing, and shockingly, wait, go back, what? I have no words. Similarly, with a lack of words, I cannot explain how Hondo got his hands on Darth Tyrannus' lightsaber off screen and simultaneously figured out his full identity. Hondo plans on holding Darth Tyrannus ransom, but to the Republic rather than back to the Separatists. Ahsoka does show up to prove her superiority while chiding Obi-Wan and Anakin as she saves the day, and she's awesome. Meanwhile, Sheev is negotiating Tyrannus' capture while trying to get him off the hook, but Padme isn't having it. They agree to pay if Anakin and Obi-Wan validate Hondo's claims, but they have to arrive unarmed. And they do, and nothing bad happens. Hondo is fun. He gives everyone the business. So other than introducing fan favorite Hondo, this episode is a hard pass. If you want to follow Hondo's storyline because you're absolutely insane, this is where to start. Otherwise, the pacing of this episode is very bad. Too many things happen, and none of them are important. Despite some fun character moments limited specifically to Tyrannus and Hondo, I put this episode below the Malevolence arc. Okay, I did not sign up for another Jar Jar episode this soon. Well, this one follows up from the previous Hondo story, but get this. They wake up drugged in their cell because of the brew that they drank in the previous episode. But if you go back to the previous episode, they swapped their drinks using the Force with the guys next to them. You can clearly see it happen. And then the guys next to them pass out. They're fine. The Jedi are fine. Not everyone else passes out, so not all the brew was drugged. They just Anakin and Obi-Wan just stare off into the distance. What happened? What kind of episode to episode retcon is this? Were all the crew drugged? Why didn't anyone else pass out? I'll let it go because I must, but geez, come on. Another thing, apparently the Republic is bringing the ransom in the form of spice for some reason. They're literally capturing high-ranking members of two opposing military factions and asking for hard drugs in return. I cannot make this up. Hondo is severely brain damaged. Meanwhile, let's hope Jar Jar doesn't get everybody murdered. In the B-plot, because we're doing B-plots now, Anakin, Tyrannus, and Obi-Wan are all stuck in the cell together and immediately get on each other's nerves. Tyrannus uses the Force to collect a knife and slams it into the locking mechanism to unlock the cell. And it works. Who wrote this episode? The C-plot, because we have time for C-plots now. The Weequay gang are trying to steal spice from the ransom deliverers and betray Hondo in the process, but I want you to look at this garage where the swoop bikes are for just a moment. This whole screen grab says so much. There's a naked lady on the bike, there's a mostly nude Twi'lek pinup girl poster in the back, and I don't even know what kind of design this is supposed to be. Who directed this episode? There's so much weird little stuff going on. Anyway, in the Jedi plot, Tyrannus and the gang get recaptured after being out of their cell for less than maybe a full minute. Again, who made this? Holy crap. The only person coming off not looking like an idiot is Hondo. These three buffoons couldn't rescue their way out of a paper bag, so where's Padme when you need her? Obi-Wan tries some mind trick moves to get the guard to open the cell, and they successfully got out of the cell last time. That wasn't where the problem was, so I don't see how this advances their situation at all. The banter between Tyrannus and the Jedi is worth all this nonsense, but oh boy is it silly. Did I mention they are tied together? Because that only adds to the hilarity. They get further this time, but they get caught by Hondo again. Hooray for the status quo. Back to the A-plot. Jar Jar has indeed gotten multiple clone troopers and the senator that was carrying the ransom killed, and now Darth Jar Jar is in charge. The Weequay swoopers attack and drive the clones and Jar Jar into a geyser that is about to burst with acid. Jar Jar figures he can time their escape before the geyser goes off by watching the nearby beasts and seeing when they take off, which is smart, and he is right, of course. This results in no hard-boiled clones for now. The clones want to wait for backup, but Jar Jar wants blood and insists that they give chase. Obviously, this means riding untrained wild beasts after high-speed swoop bikers who each get taken down by acid geysers because clones can't aim. At least one clone biffs it during this, adding to Jar Jar's body count, and multiple Weequay troopers drop. The clones try to rid themselves of Jar Jar by sending him to negotiate with the oncoming pirate tanks. Of course, the drunken Master Sith Lord Jar Jar instead unleashes his dark chaos, accidentally freeing Obi-Wan and Anakin and defeating the tank squadron in the process. Without the deadweight, Tyrannus frees himself. These pirates keep taking hostages, demanding a ransom, and capturing whoever shows up. That is not a great plan. I feel like you just end up with more hostages that way and no additional money. Jar Jar saves the day. This episode is absolutely bonkers. So that's Hondo. He's a good character surrounded by sheer chaos. This episode is so bad that it's good. It has an aversion to good sense and logic, but it's fun. In the end, that's what matters. Definitely not mandatory viewing except for you Hondo freaks out there. And despite being a Jar Jar episode, he is thankfully underplayed here. I put Gungan General above Duel of the Droids.
What? You was in combat trouble? Misa rescued you!
Anakin and the gang have to rescue Aayla Secura from an approaching droid army. We just straight up open into the action. It's hard to think after the brain rot of General Jar Jar, but it's cool to see stuff like super battle droids, mass assault dropping on a Venerator cruiser. This is just good old-fashioned Clone Wars battle stuff. The gang rescues Secura and tries to escape, but the plot-sensitive explosion chasing them is just too darn fast, so Anakin pushes the gang with the Force into the escape vessel and tries to hold off the fireball by himself. Big oof. Secura tells the Admiral they have to dock immediately with his ship to rescue Anakin, as his condition is now critical. The Admiral says they cannot possibly dock in the middle of this battle, despite having mere seconds ago watched them dock and undock with an identical ship. Mr. Admiral needs some glasses. Somehow, as they are docking, a clone trooper dies and escort slumps onto the exact combination of buttons that initiates a full hyperdrive sequence and That hyperdrive sequence is directed at the center of a star somehow. Also, the navigation computer was fried in just a specific way that they can't change course. They have to cut power to the ship. Everyone is all flying around the cabin for some reason, even though they aren't traveling at a speed any faster or specifically different than they usually do. And they're also flying towards a star. It's confusing. They successfully missed the tiny star and instead hit a nearby conveniently placed planet. This planet must be super close to the tiny star and yet is not a barren death world of fire and ash. I wish this were nitpicking, but this episode is literally doing nothing else but one insane coincidence after the next. Now that we're on the ground and making camp on this strange planet, we can slow down and talk about something very big and important. Aayla Secura's huge personality. Like, they aren't exactly sexualizing her, but between the sports bra and her absolutely stacked physique and Eastern European accent, she's coming off way hotter than most characters in this setting. Like, damn! Anyway, can't linger on that. The gang finds a tablet that indicates some indigenous life is on the planet, and Ahsoka says the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
It seems to me that the people we're looking for live near giant trees.
Very perceptive, Padawan.
Rex stays behind with Anakin's writhing corpse, and the remainder of the survivors take off into the sunset. A few dead clone troopers later, and eventually we make it to the weird alien monkey village. I have a bad feeling about this. The Elder Monkey speaks up and calls the Jedi a bunch of murder hobos, and he is 100% absolutely justified in saying so. He agrees to send his healer with Ahsoka and the clone to help Anakin, but the hot Jedi has to stay behind for a tea party. I see you, old man. Anakin is returned to the village of pacifists, and the episode ends on a mild cliffhanger as the team awaits rescue. Despite how much I had to say about this episode, there are long, drawn-out sections where very little happens. The giant bird things attack Anakin and the gang repeatedly just to make sure everybody has something to do, but it contributes nothing to the plot outside of Ahsoka trying to murder the last bird. The monkey healer stops her to illustrate that he's a pacifist. They're pacifists, and they mean it. Ahsoka is an absolute death machine in these episodes. She is ready to jump at bloodletting at the drop of a hat. This show was on a pretty steady path, but a few episodes ago it swerved right into moderate insanity and isn't letting off the gas anytime soon. Whether this is a good or a bad thing is a matter of taste. But here we are. Unless you are in love with Aayla Secura, which, fair, or unless you love accurate anti-Jedi rhetoric, this episode is just alright. I put it above Downfall of a Droid.
Well, we're not gonna crash into the star, but we're definitely gonna hit that planet.
Quick correction from the last episode. Aayla Secura is voiced by Jennifer Hale and was instructed to speak in a French accent by Dave Filoni. Honestly, that just makes her better. I love Jennifer Hale. Anyway, in the most predictable second episode twist ever, the Separatists show up to kick over a new anthill, metaphorically of course. Ahsoka is so flabbergasted that the monkey guys don't want to fight back. It's really off-putting to see her this bloodthirsty and upset at people who aren't as bloodthirsty as she is. The Separatists are here to test out a new weapon that will kill organic life but leave droids unharmed. Seems kind of like you could just use a gas or bioweapon, but what do I know? Anyway, the Separatists proceed to test their new weapon on the colonists that live here. That's the whole idea of this episode. But we take a break from that for the one awesome part of this episode, and that is the sneaking mission at night where all the Jedi infiltrate the droid base, silently taking down patrols and troops one by one. Very Metal Gear Solid. I am down with that. Hands down, best part of the episode. Anyway, the Elder Monkey goes from making a lot of sense in the previous episode to simply being in denial about the oncoming extinction of his people. When he's told straight up what will happen, he literally condemns his people to doom for no reason. Dumb. The droid army fires the weapon, the Jedi put up a big shield and block the shell, and then they fight. A little ways into the battle, some of the monkey guys gun up and start taking out droids too. They tie up all the droids' legs and knock them over at once, and Ahsoka just runs by with her lightsaber dragging behind her and multi-kills all the droids as her bloodlust demands. Even if you watch part 1 of this two-parter, this episode is still a pass, as it advances nothing. If you like Star Wars artillery, then okay, go for it. Otherwise, this is a skip even on a normal rewatch. It's not bad, but if you watch part 1 and guess what happens in part 2, you'd probably be right. This goes under Bombad Jedi. This is the first episode of the series that actually feels like filler. Oh, look how cute everyone looks in their snow gear. Except the troopers, they look hardcore. So the gang arrives on a supposedly uninhabited planet hosting a Republic base, and upon entering the base, find a bunch of dead troopers. Oops. It seems the planet is less uninhabited than once thought, as the troopers find a droid base that has been destroyed in much the same way. And if there are locals on the planet, that spells a problem for the sovereignty of the local government, if you care, that is. I have a feeling that if you haven't been captured by the first 5 minutes of this plot, you might snooze through it. Don't worry, I'll tell you if anything cool happens. The local senator's design is pretty cool though. Also those nose-beater things. Turns out the inhabitants are those weird straw-sucker nose furballs from the movies. Kinda makes no sense at all given that this is supposedly an undiscovered species. Well, wait, this is a prequel, so maybe that guy is from here. That's kinda neat if so. Anyway, these guys are sweethearts and give our good boys a big hug before sending them back on their way. Something space racism, something the rest of the episode throws in absolutely no surprises at you for the remaining 10-minute runtime. The big mean blue guy starts a fight. There's a fight. The unnecessary bloodshed is on full display. The actual authorities on the homeworld overruled big mean blue guy after he gets stabbed in the back and falls down. The obviously good-natured senator has to negotiate peace despite the violence. Actually, the way this plays out makes for a fairly compelling war story, if predictable, showing how quickly a situation can devolve into needless violence. However, for the death, it does resolve a little too easily and neatly. The Tals lose a lot of innocent troopers in a very short conflict. I did like the senator lady and her final confrontation with the Tals having to negotiate peace, but the actual delivery of that moment wasn't very good. The build-up was fine. This was an okay episode, but if you are as sick of over-the-top space racism as I am, it's another easy skip. I put this one below Duel of the Droids, and it's still better than the Malevolence arc.
As chairman of Pantora, I order you to destroy the Tals. Sorry, bro.
This episode takes place on Christophus, which is a hell of a name for a planet if I ever heard one. Larry and the gang are defending against oncoming battle droids when they get ambushed by an advanced droid force. During the retreat, Rex rips off the skull of a tactical battle droid and probe it for information. Was this kind of droid in the movies? Keeps appearing in these episodes, and I have no idea what it's called other than tactical battle droid. And I'm a droid guy. Also, this planet looks like Corneria out of the Star Fox games specifically. It's the teal turquoise spread out skyscrapers thing. Very classic early 90s sci-fi look. The gang probes the droid and realizes there is a traitor among us.
The only people in here are brothers.
That's a funny line though. So it's time to suss out the imposter before he vents. Rex and Cody figure out that the traitor is probably in Slick's barracks. Slick denies that his troops could have had anything to do with this, and as Cody interrogates Slick's unit, we see another lady portrait in the background. This time the pinup of one of the Naboo handmaidens showing some leg. Scandalous. Oh, and another one. And is that one that's the same Twi'lek poster from Hondo's swoop gang. Neat. One of the troopers is nervous, but he has an alibi, and the remaining troopers go alibi by alibi, clearing each of their names. And that brings us to Chopper, not the droid, the clone trooper. Beep boop. Turns out he's been collecting battle droid fingers as trophies, which is apparently a big no-no, and one of the earliest depictions of clones showing major character differences. Some deviation from the norm. Slick tries to pin the blame on Chopper, but gets an Uno reverse card and shows his hand instead. Then Slick takes off right away. Asajj shows up to confront Obi and Anakin. They fight. I guess the writers thought that the traitor's business wasn't interesting enough on its own, but frankly I think the traitor stuff greatly elevates this episode in general. Asajj's goal seems to just be delay the Jedi long enough for the traitor to do his thing, and she actually comes off way more competent and intimidating in this episode. She has a goal, she goes in, executes her goal successfully. It's a great plus for her character, and I like that she keeps low-key hitting on Obi-Wan specifically because it makes him uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Rex and Cody lay a clever little trap for Slick and catch him, and Slick goes, "No you," and starts punching his way out of the situation. Slick is the first character to show active resentment for his role as a clone trooper, seeing the Jedi as slave masters. I mean, he's not wrong. He's a member of a coin-purchased slave army of clone-bred troopers. He's got a point. I loved this episode. It's tight and it's to the point. It's a must-watch if you're following the clone development stuff, and it's a great follow-up to Rookies. I put it right below Rookies. I'll go so far as to add it to the watch list as a non-skip episode. The subtle advancement of clones as individuals sets up later episodes really well. Big plus for me.
I'm not the traitor. You are!
It's a Naboo episode. A few battle droids are found on Naboo and captured, spreading fear of an oncoming invasion. As they interrogate a recovered tactical droid, C-3PO complains of sensory overload and tries to go into autistic shutdown, but Padme says no. They blind the poor tactical droid and try to trick him into thinking it's on a separatist ship, but he figures it out and goes quiet before Jar Jar murders it. Still supporting the separatist objectives I see, Jar Jar's body count goes up. Regardless, some hints lead them to believe that the battle droids are messing around with the Gungans, so off we go to do that. And Jar Jar and Padme go to investigate, and they are wearing some insane Star Wars hazmat suits, which I've never seen before. They get assaulted by this crazy animal handler Gungan lady and discover that the virus has infected the water and is killing the livestock. So they investigate upriver and gets them captured by battle droids and a mad doctor type, Dr. Nuvo Vindi. This guy is rebuilding a blue shadow virus, and hey look, cameo of that little droid that gets used as a rat catcher in The Mandalorian. Neat. I love that little thing. Anyway, this guy is super lame and the Gungans are often hard to watch.
We did a robo-lobotomy on the battle droids and came up with this piece of memory.
A robo-lobotomy, what? So the good doctor wants to biobomb the galaxy using key star systems. I have no idea who approved this plan. I did mention a few episodes ago that maybe a bioweapon would be best to battle living opponents, but this seems ill-planned at best. The tension with Anakin is finally believable, at least. Padme and the entire planet are at risk if the bombs go off, so Anakin is nice and upset, and Obi-Wan's fruitless attempts to rein him in actually kind of work here, and that he can't rein him in. The stakes work, but the hero's plan seems just as poorly planned as the bad guy's plan, and they just kind of smash into the lab and go for it without any intel on the virus situation, which seems dumb. Anakin is an idiot. When he gets captured, well, he has the doc at gunpoint and surrenders because the doc flips a switch that electrocutes or something Padme and Jar Jar. Anakin could have easily shot the doc in the face or lightsabered him, turned off the electricity, and rescued them. In fact, when the doctor flips the switch again and leaves the room, that's basically exactly what happens.
You are running out of time. Catch!
Why did you die for it? You have the Force. A whole scene later, Obi-Wan dives for even more vials, and you have the Force and 2 Jedi now. Anyway, for all the murder that gets done in the show, the Mad Doc gets spared, despite his existence posing a clear and present danger to countless lives on the planet, but oh well. This episode finally gives us some good Anakin moments, but that's all it has going for it. And that counts for something. It's a silly episode, but not boring, just not great. I put it below the Malevolence arc. Mystery of the Thousand Moons is a pretty compelling name for an episode, but the second half of two-parters haven't been as good as the first, and this second parter isn't following up a particularly good episode. It looks like the rat catcher droid from before has taken off with one of the vials and manages to set off the virus bomb successfully. Half the gang gets stuck sealed in the lab and everyone else gets stuck outside. Ahsoka and the clones get contaminated, but Padme and Jar Jar have their cute little hazmat suits, so they're okay. The Thousand Moons contain the antidote, but it's deep in enemy territory, so Anakin and Larry are on the case. When they arrive at their destination, Anakin starts obliterating disabled battle droids without mercy, but apparently this Neverland-style kid has been rebuilding battle droids of all sorts to serve him. Seeing all the various droid designs on display and all mixed up like this is kinda neat, and they all have creative little quirks, but we breeze past it super fast. It appears they are now stuck on the planet due to something destroying ships that try to escape. For now, the duo goes after the root, because they need the antidote. Back at the lab, the gang gets engaged in a firefight with droids and Jar Jar manages to get Padme infected. The droids keep trying to escape to get the virus out, but obviously the gang just cuts them all down, and eventually all of the droids are wiped out from the lab. Obi-Wan and Anakin ignore warnings about the curse and try to leave the planet, but a separatist laser grid is what's preventing them from getting away, not a curse. So they are stuck while Ahsoka and Padme are slowly dying to the plague. They utilize the reprogrammed battle droids to assault the space laser grid and take the opportunity to get away from the planet and free the planet in the process so everybody can just leave. Such a huge task was reduced to a solution that worked on the first attempt. And of course, Padme and Ahsoka get the antidote in time, but most of the clone troopers did not because someone had to die, and also Jar Jar survived. Hooray. If it seemed like I went through that really fast, it's because that episode happened super fast. It's weird how you try to cram more in and less ends up happening that's worth noting. While these two-parters have overall been pretty weak, It's kind of neat to see that they're rarely a cliffhanger, and instead it's two separate stories being told from the same inciting incident. You could skip part 1 of this and not be lost on part 2, and that goes for most of these episodes. That said, this is a skip. Aside from the cool droid designs, the other cool ideas are rushed past in this episode. The pacing is abysmal, and that's really the only issue with it. Had it been a 3-parter and we spent more time trying to escape the lockdown and trying to escape the planet as a parallel story, it could have been pretty cool. Instead, it's just a cluster of events happening too quickly to appreciate anything. This goes near the bottom of the list. It's not as bad as Ambush, but otherwise it's the worst episode so far.
Impressive. You just destroyed 17 defenseless battle droids without suffering a scratch.
18, actually.
Ryloth, a Twilight homeworld, is under siege and Ahsoka is in command of a squadron for the first time. Seems like a bad call. Whatever her position and experience is, she's still a teenager. Not to rant, but the Jedi are insane when it comes to military leadership choices. This episode makes it clear that Ahsoka is up against a clearly experienced foe who is ready for the attack and springs a trap for Ahsoka, but she ignores the retreat order and gets her entire team killed. If clone lives mattered, Ahsoka would be court-martialed and relieved of duty. What a huge mistake. Now this isn't all on Ahsoka, this really is on all those who put her in charge of these clones. Her immature behavior should have been easily predictable. Anakin chides her for her performance, but he's really the one in the wrong here. She's wrong too, but he's in no position to act superior and should also be punished. But this is Star Wars, so we have to stay on task here. This is rough to watch, but in a good way. You know this is going to be a character-defining moment for Ahsoka. The gravity of the situation is felt plainly. An entire squadron and cruiser down. Side note, this is the first episode where the Separatists are referred to as the Techno Union. Despite setbacks, the attack on the blockade must proceed. Ahsoka's self-doubt takes center stage as their weakened position falls on her shoulders. Another strong point for this episode is that the major villain is actually a competent commander who plans ahead and doesn't rush in. He's the first Separatist commander who isn't awful and merely relying on strength and numbers. He utilizes existing knowledge about Anakin's strategies and plans around it, but this time Anakin has a crazy plan. Abandon one of the remaining cruisers and single-handedly pilot it into the droid command ship in a kamikaze attack. He immediately puts Ahsoka in command of the remaining force again, attempting to pull her from her self-doubt slump by force. Kinda works, and it isn't as mishandled as I thought it would be. By putting forward his own strategy and having Ahsoka put her trust in him, she should then be able to lead the fleet effectively. The clones, however, are less sure in Ahsoka's ability to lead them in such a risky and complicated plan, and understandably so. Sadly, just as Ahsoka starts to stand up for herself, the experienced commander returns and backs her up, low-key stealing her thunder. But Ahsoka executes on the plan, leading a squadron of bombers out to take out the remaining droid cruisers in the wake of the confusion caused by the kamikaze attack. It's a huge success and it actually feels kinda earned. I really dig this episode. It's an essential Ahsoka growth moment and it lands squarely on my must-watch list. The reality is, it's a great episode with tight pacing and a straightforward idea. I put this right below The Hidden Enemy. It's one of the best episodes so far.
In that case, I'll be going. Oh, you can still have my ship.
Oh my god!
Continuing the liberation of Ryloth, Obi-Wan leads a strike forced to the ground now that the droid blockade has been dealt with. Of course, they actually have to get to the ground without destroying the Twi'lek civilization, and the droids brought heavy artillery and surrounded that heavy artillery with Twi'lek prisoners to protect it from bombardment. Those droids are getting smarter. It's an Obi-Wan and the Clone Bros episode, hooray! Watching Obi-Wan use the Force to give the clones an edge is a lot of fun. The B-plot with the Clone Bros trying to rescue a Twi'lek child is a big skip. I just want them to get back to the shooting. She's safer remaining in the alley for the rest of this show time, but following around a bunch of commandos seems dangerous. Unfortunately, we spend a lot of time with these three. I get trying to humanize the victims of war, but in this case it's just kind of distracting from the ground assault mission that the episode opened up with. Anyway, the droids are keeping some Zerg from StarCraft around and starving them to unleash them on the commandos. No clue what these things really are, but apparently they're called Gutkers according to the wiki and the little girl later on. A horde of Gutkers assaults the strike team, leading to our battle for the episode. Obi-Wan uses the Force to attract all the monsters mid-battle and backs them into a ravine and has the clones drop a bridge on them. So this is technically a previously unused Force bait ability. Clone Bros reunite with the strike team and have the little girl in tow, and it turns out Obi-Wan speaks Twi'lek. What's it called again? I know it has a name, Twi'leki or Rill? It's Ryloth, so maybe it's Ral. I don't know. Unclear if those are separate languages or not. Fun fact, the Twi'lek use their Leku when speaking their native language. So, the little girl leads the clone strike team through a path in the sewers to reach the cannon, and Obi-Wan Kenobi commandeers one of the cannons to unleash hell on the droid forces, and the day is saved. The cruisers land, and the little girl's reunited with her family. It's actually a fun episode. For the middle of a 3-parter, it was pretty fun. The little girl stuff is kind of dragged, but it's not unbearable. If you like the clone stuff, this is pretty good. I put it below Cloak of Darkness. It's not a must-watch, but if you're gonna watch the Ryloth arc anyway, it's perfectly serviceable.
Yep, this is about the worst job in the droid army. What?
Part 3 of the Ryloth arc, and it's a Mace Windu episode? Haven't seen one of those yet. He's made plenty of appearances, but he hasn't carried a whole episode yet. This is looking to be a straight-on battle episode, which tend to be some of the stronger episodes when they don't get bogged down in side plots. Emir Tambor has decided to withdraw into the capital city and has strongly defended the one entry point, a laser bridge that overlooks a canyon. He is convinced the Jedi do not have the troops to take the city, and this choke point is key to his plan. Then Mace Windu introduces a surprise character, the leader of a group of Twi'lek freedom fighters in the capital by the name of Cham Syndulla. Watching this in the year 2023 is very exciting to me, because this is the earliest mention of the Syndulla family name that we get, which eventually leads to Hera Syndulla in Rebels, who goes on herself to become the rebellion general who serves during the Galactic Civil War, and possibly beyond. Sheev acts very uncomfortable with the idea of working with Cham Syndulla, which may be a hint in and of itself. Very cool, I'm a dork. Moving on. Darth Tyrannus insists to Emor Tambor that rather than let the Republic win, we go scorched earth instead, make the Republic victory look bad, putting a ticking clock on the episode's stakes. Mace meets with Cham and his rebels and negotiates an alliance to retake the city. While they are talking, he gets some blurg, like the ones from The Mandalorian. Dave Filoni, you sly devil. Before any such action can take place, the first of many Twi'lek cities suffer carpet bombing at the hands of the droids. Cham Syndulla is hesitant to assist the Republic as he fears the Republic occupation may lead to a less than free Ryloth. A valid concern, to be honest. An agreement is reached and the attack on the capital can commence. Mace and the gang take back the entrance aboard some droid transports to restore the bridge and allow his forces to enter the city safely. It's pretty harrowing overall. The stakes are super high and it feels like even success will not save Ryloth due to the bombers doing so much damage. Mace gets spotted by the droids and one of them attempts to read him his rights. It's kind of amazing how ineffective that is as the droid gets cut down mid-sentence. The bridge gets retracted and the gang is still on it. Mace force throws the clones to the other side of the bridge, then does some John Wick style action force stuff to get himself safely across. The execution of this scene is really, really good actually. The time seems to come to a slow as Mace gets himself out of some serious danger. Really kind of cool to watch, if kind of fast. The bridge is taken by the clones, and the assault begins with the Twi'lek rebels appropriately taking the lead on the way into the city. The tactical droid retreats, abandoning Tambor to the rebels and Mace as Anakin manages to take out the remaining bombers. It feels almost as though Ahsoka and Anakin were in their own separate episode this whole time, and we just never got to see it, which is kind of funny. Of course, the day is saved, and thus ends the Ryloth arc. This one was very enjoyable. I really like the tightly focused episodes much more than the ones that go off in a bunch of different directions. The conclusion to the Ryloth arc was climactic and interesting. Seeing Mace do his thing in the forefront is a nice change of pace as well. I really liked this episode. If you're watching the Ryloth arc, this is a great conclusion. It's not a must-see episode, but I wouldn't necessarily skip it either. I'm gonna put it above Storm over Ryloth. I generally recommend the Ryloth arc overall.
No wonder he got blasted. He's one of those older models programmed by a central computer. Not us. We're independent thinkers. Roger, 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 roger.
Alright, last one. Let's see how Season 1 closes out. Cad Bane shows up for the first time in this series, along with Aura Singh and a multitude of IG droids. They accost a bunch of Coruscant guards and disguise up some of the droids. Meanwhile, Anakin is up to his old movie attitude of being a horrific gaslighting husband trying to strong-arm Padme into taking a vacation without taking her values into consideration. Ugh. He even gives her his lightsaber. Yo, check out the paint jobs on these IG droids. They're awesome. Whatever Cad Bane and the gang are up to, they're heisting very excellently. The crew takes the senator hostages and even makes an example out of one by gunning him down on the spot. They contact Sheev and demand the release of Zero the Hutt, a character I'm fairly certain was in the movie and that I blocked out of my memory. It's interesting to see the very rare occasions where Sheev is caught off guard. He's usually orchestrating both sides of the Clone War in his intergalactic chess game against himself, but he has no control over the extensive criminal elements across the galaxy, and they generally act on their own accord. This is why I absolutely love the various crime elements in Star Wars. They exist on their own terms. It's really great. Anyway, Anakin tries to save the day, but he actually did give Padme his lightsaber as more than a token gesture, I guess. Look at this. Oh my god, the crime crew, they're searching the senator's rooms and they find a hooker droid hanging out on one of them. That's classic. That's amazing. Look how she covers up and everything. That's so funny. Oh god. Anakin keeps doing a sneak, and without his lightsaber, we actually have some stakes here. The IG droids are no slouches one-on-one. I'm actually impressed with how all this plays out. It's so well planned. You have a good sense of space throughout the various action scenes. Everything is so well executed, you get a strong feeling that this is not amateur hour. These guys mean business. This episode is a strong favorite. Zero is insufferable, but otherwise this episode is great. My only complaint really is that Cad Bane actually sets off the bombs at the end, and the senators are supposed to die off, but that would result in the entire Republic army closing in on them before they can get off world. The episode needed to come to a close though, so I can look past that. The bad guys win, which is all that really matters. Excellent episode, favorite of the entire show so far. I give it a must watch as it introduces criminal elements excellently, and Zero isn't the focus, just the goal of Cad Bane and his friends. Big win here, top the list, must watch. Great way for the season to end. Season 1 is off to a solid start, more so than I would have anticipated given its reputation. Looking at the list, I largely consider the Malevolence arc to be what I consider average, but most episodes ended up higher on the list. I'm sure I missed some things here or there, but this is where I stand for now. I'm mostly excited about the seasons to come, as I had forgotten more of this season than I had anticipated going in. Even though I know I've seen every episode before, I remember very little of what is to come, and that's pretty exciting to me given what I just watched. Here's the final ranking for Season 1. My must-watch list for anyone looking to skim through for just the good stuff for this season includes Episode 5, Rookies, Episode 16, The Hidden Enemy, Episode 19, Storm over Ryloth, and Episode 22, Hostage Crisis. It's important to remember that this list is based on my most recent viewing of these episodes. It's not an objective list by any means, and what I look for in a Star Wars story isn't necessarily the same thing you might be looking for, so I try to keep it fair in general. And what do you think? What are your must-watch episodes of the season? I'm gonna go straight into the next season after finishing this video up, so what do you want to see covered there? Did I miss anything here? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe with notifications so you'll know when the next season rankings drop. If you watched this far, thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot. I haven't always been the best with self-motivation, but Star Wars is something I'm really passionate about, and sharing that passion with others is meaningful to me. But for now, the sun is rising and I must rest. I'm Luden in the Dark, and you are awesome. Safe travels, my friends.